Dear Lord, we thank you for this new day and the opportunity to come before you this morning and to give all praise and honor to you. And we pray that you fill this room with your Holy Spirit as we open your word, that you pour your rain out upon us and give us understanding according to your will. Please give us a humble heart and help that the fruits of your Spirit may manifest in our lives and be with us throughout this day. And we ask and pray for these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Were you on the trip? I think you were on the trip where, I think it started before Holland, but we went to the castle in Holland and then we rented a van and we went down to France. Okay, you were on that trip?
Yeah.
Do you remember when that was?
2006.
2006. Okay, so before 2006, okay, it might have been 2005, 2004. We had some meetings in Austria just before I met Marco. And, well, we had some meetings in Europe, but Austria was one of the places. And there was a real famous Austrian theologian that had taught, I think at Bogenhofen, or I don't know which Adventist university he was teaching at, but they were getting rid of him because he had been teaching and promoting for years this crazy view about the cross. Okay, I even forget what it was, but he'd finally come out openly, and they were forced. They're not going to move a teacher on just because he teaches error in an Adventist university, but this guy was really promoting it, and it was something like Jesus wasn't supposed to go to the cross or something weird. But he also had some foolish teachings about prophecy. So he was at this meeting in Austria, and the Austrians that were there, they really reverenced this guy. They thought he was really something special, and there was one speaker there that was dealing with his foolishness on the cross, and then I had some studies with him, and I dealt with his foolishness on prophecy. So there might have been 60, 70 people there over several days, but by the time we got into the several days, the people were really alienated. Right? They were having a real struggle with myself, as the Europeans generally do. And one of them came up to me, and he was challenging me on something that I was teaching, and he quoted me what William Foy has said in 1842. And I was familiar with it, but I'd never looked closely at it. But because of the environment in that meeting, I didn't respond to the guy. And then we went from there to Switzerland. And in Switzerland, there was a guy there that was pretty... I had known of him for a few years. I had not a relationship with him, but I knew that he was supportive of the message. He wasn't fighting it. And he confronted me with this same quote from William Foy, and there was a bunch of us discussing it. And he was arguing against something that I was teaching using this quote of William Foy. So finally I said, okay, I knew the quote, but I got to look at it closely because two meetings in a row, these Europeans are bringing this quote from William Foy into the mix. So, okay, if we're going to talk about it, let's bring it up on the Pioneer CD-ROM, which it's on the Ellen White CD-ROM. And when I looked at it, I realized, hey, these Germans, Austria, Switzerland, they're all basing their position on the German language. Whoever translated this quote into German did it wrong. Okay, it was just a black and white, incorrect translation from English to German. Okay, so I'll explain that in a moment. But I'll show you something else. Before that time, this is why this is significant, or not significant, but this is why it connects with what I'm going to share here. In Revelation 9, go to Revelation 9. Verse Marco, you want to read verse 4?
Revelation 9 verse 4. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads.
Okay, shortly after 2001, a friend of mine who was the first Seventh-day Adventist to go into the Soviet Union with Bible studies after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He prepared some typical standard Adventist Bible studies. He had some people that had escaped from the Soviet Union that were living in his neck of the woods, and his church family was supporting them because they were immigrants and they needed some financial support. So what he did, without knowing about the collapse of the Soviet Union, he says, here's some old Seventh-day Adventist Bible studies, translate them into Russian. Sometime maybe we'll need them. So he has these complete set of Adventist studies translated into Russian. Then the Soviet Union collapses. And so he goes to the General Conference. He says, man, I've already got these Adventist Bible studies translated into Russian. Let's send them into Russian. So the General Conference says, well, we'll look them over and we'll get back to you. So they looked him over. They took his Bible studies, and every reference to the mark of the beast or the papacy, they removed those studies, okay, because they didn't want to step on the toes of the Pope there at the General Conference. So he took them back, including the studies on the Pope and the mark of the beast and those kind of things. And he says, well, I gotta get him into the Soviet Union myself, because if the General Conference goes in there, they're going to water it down where it's just a Protestant message. So he took it in there, and where he ended up, he opened up Ukraine. Okay, and you ever heard about the black pastor from the southern United States that has a prison ministry, big prison ministry, and he got kind of famous, this black pastor, because he connected with this friend of mine. And he started going to the prisons in the former Soviet Union. And if you were in any Sabbath school classes during that time period, you would see the work that was going on in the former Soviet Union prisons, the wonderful Adventist work that was being accomplished. It was accomplished with those Bible studies from this guy that was the head of American Prison Ministries or something, I forget. In case this guy had met people in the Ukraine. He had connected with them and became friends with the head pastor of the Ukraine, of the underground church. This guy had been the leader there during the time of the Soviet Union. He made friends with him. In the meantime, that guy died. But he knew his son. And he knew some of the other Adventist pastors. So he set up meetings in Ukraine for me, this is years later, where I went in and I did a prophecy school for the leadership of the Ukraine, is it a conference or, yeah, just a conference there, I think, in the conference office in Kiev. And for a while they were going to have us come back and teach this message. They took the Time of the End magazine and translated it into Russian. That was the first time it was translated into Russian. So after he introduced me to those people and I stayed there for a few days sharing with the leadership of the Ukraine church, he went down into Uzbekistan because he had been supporting an Adventist missionary in Uzbekistan, and he wanted to just go down there while he was close. And as he was down there, he was in a taxi driving through some city in Uzbekistan, and he bought some bottled water, and it's in the Russian language, I assume. The writing on the bottle of water, you know that bottle of water there, it's got all the stuff. So he's just casually asking the taxi cab driver, you know, what's this, I guess the guy must have spoke English, obviously. What's this mean? You know, what's he saying? And the guy told him, well, this water is special because it comes from the well of Daniel. And he says, well, what do you mean, the well of Daniel? He says, well, there's a spring here in this town, and Daniel, the prophet Daniel, is buried above this spring, so the water that comes out here is basically holy water. And I guess in past history they claim that there was a time period when some conqueror went down all the way into Iraq, I think it's either Iraq or Iran, where the historians say Daniel is actually buried, and they dug Daniel up, and they took part of his body and they brought it back to Uzbekistan and buried it there above this well, and that's the whole story. So in any case, this brother realizes he's in a Muslim country and that the Muslims have a great reverence for Daniel. So he comes to the conclusion that the way to reach Islam in the world is through the book of Daniel. And there's a lot of logic there, because everyone that Islam hates in the book of Daniel is portrayed in a negative light that would appeal to Islam. The papacy's portrayed as the man of sin. If you understand the last 6 verses of Daniel 11, in verse 41, the United States, the Sunday law, the United States is a negative role player there. If you understand Egypt in Daniel 11, that's the United Nations. So all the enemies of Islam are portrayed in a negative light in the book of Daniel, and he got inspired to start emphasizing how to reach out to Islam through the book of Daniel, and he's still out there doing it. And he and I parted ways for a number of reasons, part of which I think is because he knew that if he stayed connected with this ministry, he would not have the connections with the General Conference that he has, because he works in that part of the pond. And so when I was there in the Ukraine, he was down in Uzbekistan, and that's where we started studying Islam. And when we started studying Islam, he started studying how to worship, or not worship, how to evangelize Islam, and we started studying Islam in prophecy. Okay, so what I came to conclude based upon Revelation 9 verse 4 is that Islam is active during the sealing time. Okay, because hurt not those that have the seal of God. Okay, and this is the time period of the first woe. So I understood that in our history, which is the history of the 7th trumpet, the 3rd woe, that Islam would be active again, and that this is the sealing time of the 144,000. So what I'm saying is I understood that in the 5th trumpet and in the 7th trumpet, Islam is active during the sealing time. Therefore, I concluded, based upon 2 witnesses, that there has to be a sealing time in the history of the 6th trumpet. I knew it based upon 2 witnesses. And I began teaching it. Okay, I began teaching that 1840 to 1844 is an illustration of the sealing of the 144,000, which it is. But as soon as I began teaching that, what was I doing? I was contradicting the pioneers. Okay, and here, this is a ministry that supposedly supports the pioneers, but the pioneer says the 6th trumpet ended in August of 1840. And I was saying, no way. The 6th trumpet can't end until October 22nd, 1844, because if you cut off those last 4 years, you're cutting off the 2nd witness. 1st witness, 5th trumpet, hurt not those that have the seal of God. 2nd witness, 6th trumpet, 1840 to 44, the sealing of the 144,000 is typified in that history. If you don't include that in the 6th trumpet, then you don't have the witness of the 5th trumpet and the witness of the 6th trumpet to show that the 144,000 are sealed in the time of the 7th trumpet when Islam is active. So you weren't going to shake me from the fact that the 6th trumpet had to end in 1844, but I was doing it based simply from prophetic logic. But, so we do this trip in Austria. I'm confronted with this wrongly translated statement by William Foy, who had the spirit of prophecy. And then in Switzerland, I'm confronted with it again. I said, okay, let's look at it. Let's go ahead and compare it. And that's when I realized the Germans over there, they have a bad translation. Later on, years later, we're having a meeting with the leadership of Adventism in Germany. Marco was at that meeting. Kathy was at that meeting. And there's a famous German pastor. He's still out there. He's one of the best-known German pastors for teaching prophecy, but he's teaching, satanic prophecy, whether he understands it or not. And he does a presentation in this meeting, and he bases his entire presentation, the whole point that he's basing it upon, is William Foy's statement from the incorrect translation. So when he's doing his presentation, I don't know if it was during the presentation or when he was done, I interjected, hey, your old presentation's based upon William Foy's statement, but William Foy's statement has been incorrectly translated into German, and the English contradicts it 100%. So what you just taught is a bunch of foolishness. That got him very irritated, and one of them thereafter, from that experience, got really rude with my wife. So I went home. It was enough with those Germans. We were supposed to have another day there, but I left, so they got together and they did their position paper. And anyway, what am I saying? Here's what I'm saying. In 1842, William Foy, who had the spirit of prophecy, he went in and had it publicly recorded, a vision that he had. And in the vision, it says something such as this. The angel said, the sixth trumpet has not yet done sounding. Okay, and in English, it's bad English. But you got to remember, this is in 1842. And if my history is correct, William Foy was a mulatto, half white, half black, which tells me that in 1840, if that's what you are in the United States, you probably haven't had access to, good educational system as if anyone did in 1840. Plus he might have had some just of the African, verbalization in that history. So I admit that that statement, his English is a little bit awkward. We would never say the sixth trumpet has not yet done sounding, but that's what he says. But what he's saying is 1842, the sixth trumpet is still sounding. Okay, so from that experience, I even though I knew that passage before, it never clicked on me. Hey, I have a spirit of prophecy endorsement that the sixth trumpet didn't end in 1840 as the pioneers taught. It's still sounding in 1842. So what I had already concluded about 1844, that put it in place. It's solid as a rock. Okay, so what am I saying? I'm saying now, just keep that in mind. We'll come back to the logic of that. The pioneer understanding of the fifth trumpet, and of course, the fifth trumpet ends here, and the sixth trumpet immediately begins. Okay, but on here I have a break. Not supposed to be, but I'm trying to show something else here. Pioneers understood, even if they wouldn't express it this way, that there was two periods in the fifth trumpet. From, if you mark the beginning of Islam in 606, as the pioneers did, it's not until July 27th, 1299, that Ottoman consolidates the forces of Islam, both church and state. And then for 150 years, what does he do? He hurts Rome, okay? Because in this history, Rome's going to be hurt. In the sixth trumpet, Rome's going to die. Okay, so this begins the warfare, but it escalates in this history. So the pioneer understanding of the fifth trumpet, even though they would probably never make this point and probably never wrote it, is that there was two periods in the fifth trumpet. Since we've been studying the woes, we make a distinction. This is all the trumpet, but this period here, it's the trumpet, but it's also the woe. This is the first woe, this history here.
Must be 49, right? Yeah.
Yes, 49. Everyone with me so far?
Yeah.
So the pioneer understanding of the sixth trumpet, that's what's here on the top part. They would tell you that the sixth trumpet began in 1449 and ended in 1840. That's it. The pioneers won't give you any information that there were any other periods in the sixth trumpet. But here at the end of the world, we've came to understand, and we can confirm it from the spirit of prophecy and from the logic of the Bible, that the sixth trumpet didn't end until the seventh trumpet began sounding on October 22nd, 1844. And what the pioneers were understanding, but they were misunderstanding, is that on August 11th, 1840, the woe part of the sixth trumpet ended when Islam was restrained on August 11th, 1840. But the trumpets still began to sound. And it's in this history from 1840 to 1844 that you have your second witness of the connection with Islam to the sealing of God's people, because 1840 to 44 is an illustration of the sealing. And in this history, you have the command of Abu Bakr to hurt not those that are keeping the Sabbath, but chop the head off of the Sunday keepers. Okay, so in both the fifth trumpet and the sixth trumpet, you have Islam, but you have a period of time where the sealing is typified. Okay, so the pioneers would acknowledge and reference that in 1443 Islam brought down Constantinople, but it wasn't an important point for them. They didn't make anything out of it. This is all you're going to see from the pioneers, from my understanding, is that the sixth trumpet is from 1449 to 1840. That's it. But after the year 2000, we came to understand that it went to here, and we came to understand that this period of time here is a special period of time. It's connected with the sixth trumpet. This is the woe part of the sixth trumpet. This is the trumpet coming to an end. But here recently, probably based on several things, but at least based upon the fact that Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, if this is the sixth trumpet from here to here, we realize that at the end of the sixth trumpet there is a 4-year period marked off, which is illustrating the sealing. But in agreement with the pioneers' historical analysis, we realize there was a 4-year period at the beginning from 1449 to 1453 that was referenced. And what we have done here recently is saying that this is part of the prophetic structure, part of the prophetic mix of the sixth trumpet, that it begins with a 4-year period and it ends with a 4-year period. Okay, so if you, knowing the rule of prophecy that Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, when we bring these two 4-year periods together, that's what this is here, then we find, as the pioneers acknowledged, that in 1449 there was a power that surrendered its national sovereignty. This is national sovereignty, this is a V, to 4 powers, okay? Eastern Rome here surrendered its sovereignty to the 4 Islamic sultans. But when you get to 1840, the last weak man of the East, Sultan of Islam, surrenders his national sovereignty to the 4 European powers. Okay, so that's what the number 2 is here. You've got 2 witnesses that at the beginning of the 4 years, whether it's this 4 years or this 4 years, you have the same historical dynamic, or however you want to say it. Okay, this is probably the strongest one in the 4 years because you've got 2 witnesses. Now, in 1453, the walls of Constantinople came down, and we're seeing now that in prophecy the walls are becoming, they're growing in their significance. So we may not understand everything that means yet, but it's definitely a prophetic characteristic. If what Marco shared yesterday, and Marco's going to dig out today, if he can, the historical verification of what he claimed yesterday, if there was some kind of, was it a law or a decree?
Yeah, law, but a state. Or how you call it? What's the difference?
How do you call it? No, there's no difference.
Yeah.
It was a law here in 1844 that put a restriction upon Islam. Okay, and we're understanding that walls are a symbol of laws. So we're seeing a wall at the end of this 4 years, and a wall at the end of this 4 years And okay, so that's a characteristic. But I purposely left one characteristic out. I don't know if it's the most important, but I'm going to say what the most important. What is the most important characteristic of this history? It's not up here, and I'm only saying it's most important because it's what we're understanding about the Midnight Cry right now. In this 4-year period, what haven't I put in here that is a characteristic of this 4-year period? As soon as I write it, you'll know. I mean, I'm just going to write one word, but you'll know the whole story.
Lich's prediction.
Lich's prediction. Okay? Josiah Litch is predicting August 11th, 1840. So at the first waymark of this 4 years, you also have a prediction that has to do with what?
Restraining.
Restraining who?
Islam.
Islam. Okay, there's a prophecy of Islam that is proclaimed leading up to this waymark. All right. We might also include here that what happens right here. There's an angel that comes down. I'm not sure that's in there. I don't know if that's one that we have to put in there. Okay, so everyone, any questions about that? All right, okay. So, yesterday we're saying that this is the structure that we're understanding where every vision, the effect of every vision is accomplished. 1989, time to the end, 9/11, Midnight Cry, Sunday Law, Michael standing up, close of probation. There are other waymarks in there, but those are the primary ones that are established from Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins, and Ezekiel 7:9. But we're seeing that in this history, Islam, without even going to Revelation 9, this is the line of Revelation 9, without even going to Revelation 9, we're seeing Islam marked throughout this history from other lines of prophecy. So the fact that Islam is one of the themes that runs through this history is already established on Balaam, on historical facts. By the way, the day before yesterday, I don't think it was yesterday, I think it was the day before yesterday, they were having a show in Texas, a convention of, I don't know what it was, where they were doing cartoons of Muhammad. And two guys came in to shoot it up, and some cop shot them down. And ISIS is saying that was us, and that they were members of our caliphate. Okay, so this theme that we were just mentioning briefly yesterday may be valid. But when it comes to Revelation 9, where we were struggling yesterday, Mark has been laboring with this, and we've all been laboring with this, but we haven't spent a great deal of time really nailing down the various little details. But as he and I were discussing it yesterday, here's the logic that I presented to Mark, and we both, I think, seem to agree upon, okay, is that in the fifth trumpet, disregarding everything else except the structure of this line, there are two periods, okay? And the pioneers will uphold this, no sweat. But when it comes to the sixth trumpet, can't use the pioneers because they didn't see 1840 to 1844, and although they saw 1449 to 1453, they didn't put any prophetic relevance on it, okay? But what we're saying is that now we see, because Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, and we understand now that the sixth trumpet goes all the way to 1844, that the simple structure of the sixth trumpet consists of three periods. Right? Okay, so I'm saying that this is a witness that these periods of times, this 1-2 period, is something that is to be considered. The pioneers didn't see these periods of times like we see them, but the Lord has opened it up. And in the sixth trumpet, from 1449 to 1844, you have 3 periods of time. Okay? So all I'm saying is, and this is almost to the point where Mark would have, if I'm reflecting his position, and I'm not picking on Mark, and I'm using this discussion to try to dead end this conversation so we can move forward. Mark was having a problem understanding the different lines of prophecy that contributed to the characteristics of these waymarks here, okay, of these waymarks. And he wasn't recognizing that what I was claiming wasn't so much about the characteristics of the waymarks, but about the structure. That the sixth trumpet has 3 periods marked in it. Okay? So when I'm trying to bring the 3 periods of the sixth trumpet into this line, he's seeing what the 3 periods do to the prophetic characteristics, and he's having a problem seeing that they line up. But I wasn't emphasizing the characteristics. I was emphasizing the structure. What do I mean by that? Here's what I mean by that. Is I'm saying that when you bring these two periods, 2 number 4s together into here, that in 1840, Islam was what? Restrained. But in 1453, the beginning of this 4-year period, what was Islam?
Loosed.
It was loosed. So what that creates in this model at the end is a loosing and a restraining. Okay, now when we think of loosing and restraining in prophecy from what we've been studying, who gets loosed and who gets restrained?
Islam.
Islam. Okay.
But there's more than that.
But that wasn't so when I'm saying at the beginning of this 4 years, wherever you put it, you're got to see a loosening and a restraining. He's hearing me say, you have to see Islam loosed and restrained. So he's having a problem down here, seeing a loosening and a restraining and a loosening and a restraining. And he sees 4 loosenings and restrainings already because of early writings where it says hold, 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 hold. Okay? Hold, 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 release, loose. Right? 4 winds are fully loosed when Michael stands up. But based upon this model, we're seeing a period of time here of 4 years, and I'm saying there's a period of time here of 4 years. I'm saying that this, what we understand about this here now, begins here and ends here. This is what the sixth trumpet was typifying. But the sixth trumpet has a specific structure. 4 years at the beginning, 4 years at the end, and a period of time in the middle. So when you bring the sixth trumpet down to this history, and you have a holding here, what Mark was struggling with is, how can you put a hold and a restrain here when these 4 have been emphasized, okay? And when we finally started seeing what we were seeing differently, I let him know, and this wasn't anything I invented. I'm saying there has to be a holding and a restraining and a loosing here simultaneously. But I'm not insisting that it is Islam. Okay? And down here, same thing. He was hearing Sister White relate to us, hold, 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 while God's people are sealed. That is this history. And he was having difficulty seeing hold, 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 hold. Okay, so it was a valid observation. But what I'm saying is, there's a holding and restraining and a holding and restraining here, and the line of the tribe of Judah has not yet clarified what that holding and restraining was. Okay, as an example, in 1 Samuel 25, the story of Abigail, David, and Nabal. Okay, when Nabal refuses to support David, David says more than once, what's he going to do? He's going to kill every man that pisseth against a wall. All right? What's it mean to piss against a wall? Yeah, what's a wall?
God's law.
It's a law. This is an illustration of a disregard for some type of law. So where's David heading to kill him?
To midnight cry.
To Carmel. Okay, and Carmel's already been established as the midnight cry. So before David intends to kill every man that pisses against the wall at Carmel, and he's on his way. But before he gets there, what happens? Abigail comes and restrains him back here. Okay, so there's we can see a restraint here. So the point is, in our discussion, once he realized that those of us that were seeing this are not demanding that the hold and loosing and the hold and loosing here are Islam, then we could see that before the midnight cry, there's some other prophetic characteristics that mark.
I think the loosened though is marking Islam. It's just the restraining is the problem.
Yeah, no argument there. I'm saying that the line of the tribe of Judah has not clarified all these little details yet. Go ahead.
Isn't Balaam also restrained before the midnight cry because the angel gets in the way? In the same sense as David and Abigail.
Does the angel get in the way all three times or just once?
All three times.
All three times, yes.
Okay, so
Be restrained prior to the mark where he strikes 3 times. If that was...
yeah, so I don't know if you separate those by time. Okay, because at 9/11, Islam strikes, and then Balaam strikes back. I don't know if you can separate it back to here. So far we've understood that this is the waymark, both of them, the angel and the striking, but we're open for correction on that. So when we're dealing with this, the sixth trumpet, you also have Elizabeth and Mary. Okay, and Zechariah. Why are we placing Zechariah at 9/11? Pardon me?
Because he's tarrying and an angel comes down and
he's tarrying in the sanctuary. An angel comes down
and he gives him a message and he disbelieves
and
it.
gives him a prophetic message, and he disbelieves it, and he's a symbol of the leadership. Okay, at 9/11, they reject the prophetic message that comes at 9/11. They no longer have the ability to present the message, to speak it. They've sealed themselves totally into this apostate Protestant methodology of studying the Bible. So Zechariah is struck dumb here, but sure enough, his wife gets pregnant, and then she's in hiding for 5 months. Okay, that's why you put this one up here. This 5 months of Elizabeth is lining up with what?
The 150.
The 150 years, the 5 months of the Revelation 9, of the 5th trumpet. So when you get to here, you have 1 month, and in Revelation 9 you have 4 years, and in Revelation 9 this number 4 there's all kinds of references to the number 4 in this history and this history. And it takes you to here in the line of Elizabeth and Mary. Why do I have incarnation here at the midnight cry?
Because that's when Mary.
That's when Mary is impregnated by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
When she comes and she visits Elizabeth,
Double prophecy.
and they both prophesy. There's a double prophecy right here. This is the midnight cry. And then what Brother Tyler often gets to is that this would be a total of 6 months for Elizabeth's gestation. Is that what it's called? Pregnancy? Anyway. 3 months later, John is born. And what happens? Zechariah speaks.
Yeah.
Okay. How many speakings do we have at the Sunday law?
Well,
Because this is the Sunday law.
you got to speak like a dragon as well.
Is the United States going to speak like a dragon?
The ass.
The ass is going to speak here in the story of Balaam.
So you got
Okay, so the speaking here, when Zechariah can speak again, pretty clear.
You got all 3 entities there speaking: the Islam, God's people, and the Threefold Union.
Okay, and so from here, this is 3 months to come to the birth of John, and Mary is impregnated at the beginning of the 3 months. So when is Jesus born?
6 months later.
6 months later. Right here. And this is one that sometimes Tyler, this is one of his pet projects to figure this one out. Because initially, the birth of Jesus, we're saying is what? What have we taught? And I think it's correct. Can a figure have more than one meaning? Okay. What have we been teaching about the birth of Jesus for years?
That's the time of the end.
It's the time of the end in his reformed line. Okay. But now we're placing the birth of Jesus down here, and what are we saying that this is?
Just before the close of probation.
Just before the close of probation, but what does it represent? Who typified Jesus?
Moses.
Moses. And when they were both born, what took place?
A great slaughter.
A bloodbath. Okay, so this is the period of time where the blood is spilled in earnest before Michael stands up. Now, the reason that I went ahead and put that on there is, what does it do? It gives a period of time right here. What I'm understanding, and I think you can back it up particularly with the story of Pergamos, 2 Thessalonians, the mystery of iniquity and the falling away, and with Judas, that this period of time here, this period of time here, and this period of time here, among other things, represent what I'm going to call the binding off. Okay? Who gets bound first?
Tares.
The tares. And then the wheat get bound. But there comes a point in the process where there's a binding off, binding into bundles. And the reason I choose that word, if you start looking closely at the Hebrew, over and over again, there are Hebrew words that will fit into this waymark area. And if you trace the root of the Hebrew words, it has to do with being bound together. All right, there's a binding off that goes here. So if all three, if we have this one down here, this period of time when Moses and Jesus are being persecuted, or Pharaoh and Herod are trying to kill the babies, and if that's illustrating the bloodbath at the end of the world, and if it's a binding off, then who is this? And the people answered not a word. Okay, well, who's this?
Priest.
Priests, okay.
Oh, got you. I wondered what you were getting at. That'll be the 11th.
I before Eve.
I before you.
Yeah, that'll be the 11th of workers then, I guess.
Priests. Now, yeah, this is the Levites. But who are the priests and the Levites?
When the
144.
first fruits.
Yeah. These are both Esther.
Yeah.
Who's this?
Ruth.
This is Ruth, the 11th hour workers. That's what I was getting at. This is the story of Ruth, and this is Esther, and this is Esther. First fruits, all that, everything you said is correct, but I'm just tying it in with our recent study. Now, there was something that I was going to say about this history up here, the reason that I led into it, and it has slipped away.
Jeff, are you going to emphasize because we spoke about yesterday about time, that's what's getting brought up, about the 4 points of time there, that there's no need to emphasize the time aspect, because we're looking at the structure.
Okay, he's wanting me to bring up that we should be emphasizing time. And what I was saying to him yesterday, and I'll say it again to him today, because of what you were hearing, I think you were hearing us put an emphasis on time, but we weren't.
No. What I'm saying is, you got a number 4 there.
Yeah.
In the 6th trumpet. So when you look at Revelation 9, you have to read it with no time applied at all. I'm about when you read it, you must apply those 4 time periods, an hour, a day, month, a year, as a number 4.
Yeah, everyone get that?
Yeah.
So
that's valid. I get that.
So what you're doing, but when you get to the end of the number 4, you have a restraining, regardless of the structure that we've already got there. So it's confirming there's a restraining along with the other ones, marking at the midnight cry.
Okay, what he's saying is if you have an hour, a month, a day, and a year, as you do in the 6th trumpet, which is the 391 years and 15 days, when we bring this history and this history together and mark the number 4, we're doing it here after 1844, and after 1844 time is no longer. So when we place in the history of 1449, this is the beginning of the hour, day, month, and a year, hour, day, month, year, and you see this 4-year period, then these 4 expressions of time are not identifying prophetic time or time, they're identifying 4 expressions of time. They're a number 4. So it's Sister Brahma.
But based on how we're using Leviticus, it is not unreasonable to not just see the number 4 there, but to see a specificity in it as well.
What's the specificity?
Or, yeah, however you say that word, not just the number 4, but that it's very exact. That's another line of that. Not just 4, but there's an exactness to it. And I think I agree with the 4, but I agree there's more truth to it than just 4. I think there's...
What's the exactness that you see?
I see that... Yeah, an hour, a day, a month, and a year. Every word must have its bearing. And when you see those 4 things, they're specific. It's bigger than just a time of 4. 4 is the general overview. There's a fractal to that 4, and that is that there's very specific time elements involved with that prophecy.
Okay, if I this is what I brought up. Not that it matters that I brought it up in Mark's presentation a couple Sabbaths ago, or where I don't know where it was, but
Sabbath.
Is it if you start this? If you put this waymark here, back here, then you have a number 4 all the way through, and it's a binding off period. The Levites do not have the grace from here to here that the priests had. The priests get to grapple with this prophetic testing message, then they come to the binding off period of time. The binding off for the Levites is here. This is Mark. They have to have a period of time to grapple with the message before they reach the conclusion. If it's important to you all to say,
I think it's the restraining, Jeff. We've got to be consistent with Revelation 9. I agree that the woe is consistent. It's the 3rd woe. But according to Revelation 9, we have to mark a point where it's loosed and restrained. I think that's the main contention. Whether we...
Is that what you guys are contending? You have to mark a point in time when it's loose and constrained?
Yeah, I'm just
Restrained?
marking if we're marking the others, we have to mark that one, is what I'm saying.
That it's loose and restrained.
That it's
But a loosening and restraining
Yeah, we've got
sort
a mark
of
that's restrained.
No, because
shows
it's
a
gotta-
beginning and the end of a woe and the beginning and the end of a trumpet. That's what people are talking
It's got to
about.
fulfill the prophecy. That's the point. Because all the other marks there are fulfilling, because we've got restraint. Like for instance.
Okay, but this is where you and I were at yesterday, in my mind, is there has to be a loosening and restraining at the beginning of the number 4, because there's a loosening and a restraining.
Yeah.
But the Lord hasn't identified exactly what the loosening and restraining is going to be at the beginning of the 4 years. We're thinking, because we see a loosening and restraining at the 4 holds, that it's got to be Islam here and Islam here that's loosed and restrained. And I contend that might not be, because it hasn't been established upon 2 or 3 witnesses at this point.
Well, at the end of the 5 months, though, you have a definite loosen. We know it's a definite loosen of Islam. So you've got one witness there.
Okay.
And if we line up, if we take the testimony of the line of Christ, we know that it's before the triumphal entry in Bethpage, where the ass is loose. So you have 2 witnesses there that it's the ass that's loosed at that point in time, right? So if we're
Who's restrained?
oh, we that's okay. We don't know that yet. We know that Abigail comes and
David was restrained.
Christ. Okay, Christ is holding back from doing something at this point.
Okay. Who's loosed here? You're saying it's at the you're using the restraint and the loosening of the midnight cry because it works.
No. I'm not referring to the midnight cry at the moment. I'm referring to that point there. Okay, so that's the end of the 5 months. That's where the ass is loosed. That's where Bethpage is, because it's before you get to Jerusalem.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a loosen and restraint there. We can see that the loosen is Islam, but we can see the restraining is something to do with Christ is being restrained from doing a work. So we have that. But when you go, if you're being consistent, then that's taking care of the first woe, because we've got all these restraints, these commands to hurt not, because there's different things, hurt not the earth nor the sea. So we have to categorize those things, the work that's taking place by Christ and Islam at that point. So if we're being consistent, an hour a day, a month, and a year, which is not based upon time, is fit in this box of as a number 4, and it's consistent with many witnesses, then the end of that woe, I know that's all the third woe, I'm just saying there's a restraint, and it would clearly mark up with the midnight cry, and it doesn't affect any of the loosening restrainings at the beginning of the number 4, because we have that nailed down based upon other prophetic principles. So
yeah, I don't have a problem with the restraint here.
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping Marco can bring in.
yeah,
On his
because
historical.
that would be 1844.
Yeah,
also.
1844. There's a restraint marked here.
Also,
Yeah.
But I don't think that fact demands that you start this 4 years here.
No, that's right. I agree with that. I totally agree with
Okay.
that. Nothing's getting broken with that structure. I'll be a leader, and that's bang on.
Okay, so what we're dealing with here is that Bronwyn and Michael and Tyler and maybe others are saying that in the history of the 6th trumpet, this is where the 6th trumpet begins, but right where the 6th trumpet begins, the second woe begins. And the second woe in the Revelation 9 ends here, and the 6th trumpet ends here. So, second woe ends here.
That's
Yeah,
what I think.
that's what I.
But what does that mean?
Just a marker. We don't know necessarily.
Yeah, but the
everything.
second woe ended in 1840. It's typifying something other than the second woe. Just like the day, hour, month, and a year is typifying something different than a time prophecy. Just like the 150 years is
Fine.
150 days in the story of Elizabeth. Okay, so I think we're demanding the ending of the second woe here, where the ending here is not going to be the second woe, it's going to be something else.
But the ending
can't-
will be there.
No, you can't put it there though. You got to turn that number 4 into time to put it there.
I don't.
You do.
No, you don't. Not if
An
you're using the
event, an
structure.
event could.
You're not,
event
if you're
could-
using that structure, you
It's
don't.
Revelation 9 that dictates when it ends. The structure is not dictating when it. The structure is you're
Yeah, I
retaining.
get your point, and you guys need to understand his point.
I can't.
He's saying that in the Millerite history in Revelation 9, what they were understanding is that the second woe ended on August 11th, 1840. It ended at the end of a time prophecy. Okay? And we're wanting to say, okay, it ends here. But in order to say the second woe ends here, he's saying that you have to use the 391 years and 15 days to make that demand. And I'm saying you don't have to use the 391 years and 15 days. You simply have to use this structure.
That's right.
And where you guys are confusing the issue, I believe, is that you're demanding to see the second woe end here, where it's something else that ends here, and it's
the structure ends there.
Yeah,
one part of the structure.
Let's put it this
ends
way:
there.
there is a waymark here.
Okay,
Yes.
that's
Okay,
perfect.
okay, my next question is, what makes that structure? Revelation 9.
Yes.
Okay?
Amen.
So go to Revelation 9 now and make it fit that without turning any time. You can't do it.
But how do you do the
You don't
other
have
one?
to do it.
No,
How do you do
no.
the, how do you do the
Nobody
5
So,
months?
does
without
okay
turning
then,
5
okay
months
then.
at a time?
Then the
How do you-
hour, day, month,
we
and
do the
year
5
then
months.
becomes void.
Same thing.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. The literal fulfillment, the literal fulfillment of Revelation 9 establishes a structure.
Right.
But that literal structure is going to be applied spiritually at the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And time is no longer.
Yeah.
Right.
So okay, I understand that.
We establish the structure from Revelation 9 and we can retain the structure.
Right. So how do you apply an hour a day, a month, a year?
Just as you said, where
Uh-huh.
nobody's arguing, that's the number 4. In our history, it's the
Right.
number 4.
Right.
Okay. So.
And I don't have a problem if you're hearing him.
I don't think they
his-
understand me, but I'm trying to
If
wrap
you're
my mind-
hearing him, he's also saying, connected with this number 4, is that at the beginning of the 391 years and 15 days, there is a loosening, and at the end, there is a restraint. So he says this number 4 from the hour, month, day, and a year brings with it a beginning, a loosening, and an ending,
sort of
a
event.
restraint.
Some
Okay.
sort of event.
Yeah, both.
we'll
So
do
when
that,
you put it to
show
both,
that.
you apply it to both. At the one at the midnight cry, you have a loosening and a restraining, and that the number 4 there, you have a loosening and a restraining. But from the other structure, we also have a restraining at the beginning. So we've got a loosening and restraining at the beginning, and a restraining at the end of the number 4. That's the conclusion.
No, and a loosening.
Yeah, there's-
You have both at both.
That was my.
Okay, yeah,
that's what
okay.
I've been saying for several months now. Is that in early writings, where Sister White says that nations are angry. That's Islam. That's their prophetic activity. The nations are angry yet held in check. They're loosened and restrained simultaneously.
It's like a feast and a famine. It's the same principle.
Yes.
Some are feasting, some are in a famine.
at the same
That's
moment.
right.
So
But
here's what we're saying, and we're saying this not necessarily for what I'm going to, the claim I'm going to make here. But Mark is going to teach us in California this week, all right? So what we're saying is we're pretty much, we're in agreement on these things. But what we do not yet understand, because the Lion of the tribe of Judah has not provided the details, is all the little nuances of this number 4 and this number 4. It's not there yet.
Why would we be bringing this out to the group and any group
We're not even
until
completely
you can
settled
get
into
this?
it.
Sister White says we may not be able to understand every symbol in the book of Revelation, but we should teach the people what has been
Because the
revealed.
people may have the answer.
Yeah.
Someone else may have
Now
a
you've
better
got
answer.
you've got to bring Exodus 41 back into play now. And,
Genesis 41?
Genesis, thank you. Genesis 41 back into play, because remember the 7 years leads up to an east wind. That's the whole crux of play, and we're not understanding exactly.
From in Genesis 41,
yeah.
Joseph comes into Pharaoh to give him the understanding of his dream. And we understand the 7 years of plenty takes you to the midnight cry, which brings an east wind. And it takes you to the Sunday law. There's all kinds of lines now that justify bringing Revelation 9 into this, even though we don't understand all the little nuances.
Of course, this is not hindsight. This is things that we are not even seen yet.
Some of them. No
The
doubt.
markers along the way are things that will happen that will prove all these things, and they're not even here yet.
The characteristics of 1840 are taken outside of the date and applied in 3 different ways on that line right there. And that's okay because it's derived from the structure and the prophetic understanding of the number 4, prophetic understanding of generally what Revelation 9 is teaching, the loosing and restraining, correct? Because if you were going to look at it, you would say right there at the beginning of where the 6th trumpet starts, in that history right there, that would be typified by 1840 in the sense that there is a restraining, but it's typified by 1449 in the sense of a loosening. And then at the midnight cry, Mark is saying that at the end of the 391 years, which is just marking the number 4, it's marking the restraint, which is 1840. That's the characteristics. And then right before the Sunday law, at that point in time, we're seeing the same thing. It's typified by 1449 and 1840 in that it's a loosening and a restraining.
You have to have a loosening at
So
the
you
midnight
see
cry too, though.
that
Yeah.
applying 1840
Yeah,
stringently.
Hold.
Is that when I said, oh, put 1840, you're saying we don't need to necessarily put 1840 because we're deriving the characteristics of the prophetic argument to put in our time, and it applies in several different places.
So if you're going to put 1840 here and 1840 here, it can teach you a lot of things, and some things we don't know. But what does it teach you? Well, one of the things it teaches you is there's some special message about Islam here and here,
Yeah.
based upon Lich.
Yeah.
Because Lich is predicting August 11th, 1840. Lich makes a prediction that is fulfilled here and here about Islam.
Yeah, and I think part of the prediction that we're given when you look at Genesis 41, it's not just about the midnight cry. It also incorporates the Sunday law because it's the 2 walls, and you can see that they're both being emphasized there, and it's been emphasized in Balaam and all the way through. So we're not fully understanding that yet. That's why I'm not so sure that we're actually given that. You know, we're not actually making the prediction yet. We're still in the form of.
Yeah, it's being formalized.
It's been
Well,
formalized.
it's exactly like what you guys said, but more specifically with Lich. It was 2 years before he made the prediction, but then it was about 2 weeks before. So he got more specific with it.
That's right.
So it could be like dun and dun.
So this
Yes.
thing about time, that I've had several emails, people going on about, what do? We see these dates approaching, and I've just told them, just ignore them.
Please.
Yeah. Ignore,
Time is no longer.
ignore the dates, don't worry about it. This is where we should be focused.
Well, I don't.
Go ahead.
I don't think, because I've talked to Mark about that before, about the if we're saying when the gay rights law goes into effect, that marks the midnight cry.
Are we saying that?
No.
Uh,
We're not saying no.
Are we saying that when those
We're
not
saying
saying
that there's a logic that appears to
there's a logic that
connect, but
appears.
We're not
Some
we
people
haven't
are
got the
saying-
information
some
to
people are
say
saying-
this is what's happening.
Some people are saying it matter of factly.
Yes, and they're quoting us to do so.
Yeah, that's
But
the
But
thing.
we're not
Yeah.
quoting
we can't
that.
control that.
No,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying though.
Even-
but when that person takes it in a matter of fact way and says we're being dogmatic about that,
We've
that-
got it recorded that we're not.
no, I know what I'm saying, but in light of that person, when you see that and you're saying, okay, they're saying this, okay, I know that event, not that time, this isn't a time thing, but I know that event is going to happen this year. I only have this year. You know, it's like Millerites knew on 1844 that their probation was going to end.
The
They were
Lord-
pretty, it was time, but it was an event more so.
The Lord will decide when that happens.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah,
ignore
absolutely.
the time what they're saying.
Sister Bronwyn, then Sister Kathy, then we have to close. And how come our students are so silent?
Our students haven't been silent.
No.
One of our girl
I'm
students
talking
have
about the
been.
ones from Europe. Go ahead, Sister Bronwyn.
I was under the understanding from the messages I've been hearing taught from you that you aren't even specific on the event. You aren't even specific that it is gay marriage, exactly that is what is coming, or that it is women's ordination, or all these things. That our ministry has not been specific on even that. And I'm hoping that's true.
There's a there's a criticism, not a criticism, a constructive criticism that has come in about this class, people that are watching it on the web, about, I should get up and present what we're going to study first, get it in place, then have some interaction. But basically it's saying, it's implying that I should take a little bit more control. But there's two things going on here. There is a classroom going on, and there's a recording that's going out on the web. And I believe, and I believe I'm right on this, that what we're doing first here is a classroom. And in a classroom, I believe, this is where I might be wrong, that you have to allow other ideas than the truth to be aired out, so people can work through their misunderstandings. And if I was to cut off every idea that I've already determined is wrong, I'd be a kingly power, and it would not be conducive to study. So I believe this is the kind of classroom you need to have. And the people that are watching it on the web, they might struggle over it because they're thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be watching a sermon where the guy's giving me from A to Z and everything's straight in it, and that's not what's going on. So those people that are seeing us grapple with the implications of gay marriage and women's ordination in line with what's unfolding with the line of tribe of Judah, and saying that we're being dogmatic about it, are not understanding what's going on here. This is a classroom where we're trying to allow the line of the tribe of Judah to lead us to some conclusions, but we're also allowing one another to make some mistakes along the way. Go ahead. Sister Kathy first.
That's all I was going to say too, is because we're seeing these events coming up, we see that they may be significant, but we don't know which way they're going to go, because we don't know what the Lord's time is. So because we see these events coming up and we think that they may play in the role of where we're at in the history, doesn't mean that we're predicting that this is this or this is that.
Yeah. But
not yet.
We can see their significance, but it doesn't mean we don't know that our church will say no to women's ordination, and we don't know that the Supreme Court will say no to gay marriage.
Right.
So we don't know these things, but we see that they could be, because we know where we're at in the history, that they could be very significant, but we don't know that.
Well, the point, the point is we will know. And because we're going to make a prediction, we don't make sort of half-baked speculations on things that we're not sure about. But I don't think we're at that point yet to be specific.
That's what I'm saying. We do see that.
But as what she's saying is, as we're trying to figure out what's going on, we take these historical events that are coming down and play with them to see if they fit.
But people put words in your mouth a lot.
Before you close, there's an email circulating about a presentation you did recently in California, and it's matter of fact.
It is.
They're saying you are saying this as like pretty much the prediction.
It isn't true, because I was at those. It's not true.
No. It might be true. I may say something like that in a portion of a weekend meeting that comes across matter-of-factly. But if you would look at the entire weekend meeting, you will see that the context has already been established at some point along the line, that just like we're saying here, we don't really know yet, but this is what we're seeing. And
I said the same things in Africa. I said the same things, and I told them this is what we understand at the moment. Okay, this is what we're looking at. I told them the same things. So I'm not saying that I understand it perfectly. And these guys are coming back and starting talking about time, and I've told them, where did you get time from? Stop looking at the dates.
Brother Michael, let's have a closing prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and reason out these truths in regards to Revelation 9. And Lord, it seems like many of us here struggle, and there's people online who are struggling to understand all of these things, and so I pray that you pour out your Holy Spirit upon us. Help us to understand these things as you have promised that you would send the rain in the time of latter rain. So we claim this promise. In Jesus' name, amen.